Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we've got Charisma by Jeanne Ryan, the author of Nerve, which I have also done a review on. This has a 3.5-star rating on Goodreads. I personally think that it deserves more. This is 400 pages and took me 5 hours to finish. Aisling has always been cripplingly shy, hiding from the world while wishing she could step into the spotlight. So when she's offered charisma, an underground drug guaranteed to make her shine, she can't resist the temptation. The effects are instant. Aisling's charming, funny, and popular, just like she'd always wanted. But suddenly, so are lots of other people. Then the doctor behind the miracle drug disappears, and people's behaviour starts spiralling out of control. What if the symptoms are contagious? Or worse, deadly? One dose is all it takes. When I read the synopsis for this book, I felt that not only was it a rather accurate depiction of present society, but that it could also very well be a metaphor for the way that society operates. The first sentence in this book is brilliant. I swim varsity, but I know firsthand what being trapped below the surface feels like. I just thought, wow, I'm hooked already. Even though I love metaphors, for the sake of descriptive writing, they have to be used sparingly, and if they don't produce the exact right amount of imagery, they can sometimes read out of place. But at the end of this first paragraph, where the protagonist is trying to force themselves to speak to someone, the text says, my heart's a machine gun in my chest, my voice a lost cause. I just thought, wow, based on the text's narrative style alone, I knew I was going to enjoy reading this. I already loved the writing style, and I hadn't even turned to the second page. Now, when I refer to the writing style, I'm referring to the narrator's voice, which in this case is Aisling's running monologue. I found Aisling very relatable. She's quite shy, although she has a loud personality that only a few people know. She just wants to fit in for the sake of not drawing attention to herself. But when she gets the chance to change things, she grabs it with both hands. It wasn't until page 21 that I felt I started to get a suggestion as to how what I'd read in the synopsis might fit into the main plot. I hit chapter 8 after an hour, which is my average reading speed of about 100 pages an hour. That also meant that I hadn't put this book down since I first started reading it. At this point in the novel, there's also a suggestion of a romance plot slowly simmering, so I was getting slightly excited. The end of the last chapter that I read at this point had me absolutely gutted. The two characters that I just started shipping were about to have their moment when Aisling's mum crashes them. It keeps things realistic in the sense that nothing is perfect, but having spent the best part of 8 chapters building the reader's emotional investment in these characters, this was a perfect example of almost giving the reader what they want, but also leaving them wanting more, and it worked brilliantly. Chapter 9 was the first time that I put the book down since first picking it up, and that was only because it had gone past lunchtime and I was hungry. But at this point in the novel, everything's going rather well, things are working out, and so I can't help but think that something's about to change, which obviously made me want to carry on reading. Coming up to chapter 12, I was quite amused when I realised what had happened, and I feel that this effect on the reader is so cleverly written. Aisling and a group of others are in the wrong for something that they've done. However, I found myself getting quite annoyed whilst they were getting reprimanded by their parents who didn't know the full story, who didn't have all of the information, and were jumping to conclusions. So even though Aisling and her friends were in the wrong, in my opinion, I was very irritated when their parents were reprimanding them for it and got annoyed at their parents, who technically didn't even actually know what had happened, even though if they did know the full story, they'd have every right to be more than annoyed. Once I realised all of that in regards to how I felt, I found it quite amusing. Chapter 13 was the first point in the novel that I didn't really know where the plot was going. Now, from the perspective of the reader, this can go one of two ways. Either I'm going to want to keep reading to find out where it's going to go, or I'm going to get bored and lose interest. Now, at this point, not knowing where the plot might be going, but knowing what I already did and having the emotional investment that I did in the characters, I absolutely wanted to continue reading to find out what was going to happen. The end of chapter 14 was a plot twist that I was just not expecting. I felt sick, and it was one of those moments where you look up from the book and feel really annoyed that the world is just carrying on as if you haven't just experienced emotional trauma at the hands of a paperback. Romance is hinted at throughout the plot, but I felt that it took me a lot longer than it should have to realise Aislinn's romantic dilemma, chapter 17 to be exact, so of course I had to continue reading. So at this point I'd been reading for the best part of 3 hours, and I'd almost finished the book. So chapter 22, I have no idea what's about to happen, but it doesn't seem to bode well. The reader in me is convinced that it won't end with the bad ending I feel is being hinted at, so I'm hoping that things will end well, but tensions are very high at this point. Page 307, just over 4 hours into this book, I slammed it down thinking, what's the point? It was one of those moments where you feel very annoyed at the author. It felt like I sped through chapter 4, because at this point I was also beginning to feel sick. It was actually then that I realised I would be finishing this book in less than 24 hours. Tension and suspense only seemed to be increasing, and I had one of those moments where you look up from the book just to see everyone carrying on with what they were doing, and I just thought, how is no one aware of how stressed I am right now? Page 331, I've no idea how everyone in the house hadn't heard me gasp, but I'm convinced this has to be the last plot twist, given that I've only got about 50 pages of the book left. But it's one of those moments I just thought, I need answers. Only 10 pages later, my heart is in my mouth, I don't know what's about to happen, I realise there are still loose endings to tie up, I'm not breathing properly because I keep holding my breath, and I still need answers. So I found out who the actual villain is, and I was just so taken aback that I had felt so strongly about a particular character, and then it turns out they weren't even completely to blame. I now had 20 pages left, and my head was in a spin. Chapter 28, I was livid. The only reason that I didn't cry was because my mum was sat opposite me at the time, but I was so angry and upset. There were 10 pages left, and I saw very little point in finishing them. That being said, the ending was brilliant. It was a classic cliffhanger ending that suggests a number of things could happen after the ending of the book, but I was probably still too annoyed at what had not long happened to appreciate it at the time. This book left me so upset and annoyed that I would obviously 10 out of 10 recommend it. Considering how much I loved reading Nerve, I'd say I loved reading this just as much. The romance plot is very cleverly written, and it has a perfect ratio of realism to fiction, given the context of the novel. I don't think I'll be reading this again anytime soon, because I am still very annoyed, but obviously that means I'd absolutely recommend this book, especially to romance fans and sort of dystopia fiction fans. Now, I've waited a while for the hype to die down, but I was thinking at some point of reviewing Bridgerton at some point. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. Like and subscribe if you want to see more book reviews, and hit the notification bell so you know when I upload my next video.